Welcome back to Kevin and Tenisha Mix It Up. Today we have a very special episode. Like every episode, pretty much this season, we are bringing other guests in. We're bringing people that we, Kevin and Tenisha, can mix it up with to gain some additional insight and hopefully propel us forward, and our audience and those watching and listening. Again, make sure you are plugged in. If you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube, you get those notifications every time one drops. Follow us on Instagram at Kevin and Tenisha. That's with a K and a T.
Stop it.
So make sure you follow us so you can keep up to date with all of the content we are dropping. So today we are joined by a good friend, my
son.
Your son, a young man,
yes.
Who is going to give us some very relatable knowledge.
We're going to be learning from him today.
We're gonna learn a little bit from him. So welcome, Cameron Justice. What's up?
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. It's been a dream of mine to be on this podcast, so I'm excited.
Aww.
A dream come true.
Yeah, we are excited you're here. We're ready to gain all the knowledge, insight, and diversity wisdom that you have.
For sure. So Cam being here today, it really checks all of the boxes for us because mix it up with something, that we created the idea for this in like 2018, early 2019, where our conversation was, that we have something to offer because of our diverse family, because of our experiences with diversity,
and not just race, just diversity in the context of how I was raised, how Kevin was raised, how our children literally have 4 different sides to their family. 2 on my side, 2 on his side. Nope, 5 different. 5 different. See, look. And we had to draw a map for his mom to understand my side of the family. So we are very mixed up.
Yeah, we are mixed up. But, not only about race, but race was definitely a part of it. And we haven't dove into that a lot yet on this podcast. But obviously, I am a Caucasian American.
Are you?
No.
Stop it.
I use the term white. Tenisha is an African American. Do you often use the term black?
I actually use the term blended.
Oh, she's black.
It's like I use the term, I circle in black.
Yes, and that means that when we had kids, that they were black. Hot take, but we have mixed race children, and they are going to grow up in a mixed race world, and they're going to have their own, I don't know if it's going to be a struggle, but they're going to have their own experience with identity and how they identify. So Cam being here helps us dive into that conversation a little bit because he checks a lot of the boxes that Tenisha was talking about. He has a diverse family experience. But he's also has a diverse experience racially, and not only is he of mixed race, but he grew up in a suburb, and that's really what we're going to be talking about, growing up in a suburb as a mixed kid and kind of going through that, what he learned, what he grew, what he developed, and how that was. Selfishly, I want him to be here because I want to learn from his experience.
Absolutely.
Because I have 2 children that are in a suburb that is a little different, but not too different. So I'm excited to kind of dive into this and learn from him. And I think our listeners and our audience, from what I know it to be currently, can also take from what he has to offer today, because a lot of times I think we get in this mindset that we can only learn from those who are older than us, or who have been through what we've been through, or have wisdom. But I don't think that's the case. I think today a lot of our audience are parents, or a lot of parents of which who are raising families in suburbs, black, white, mixed, or whatever. And his experience is going to speak to you, and I think pull out some things that maybe you're experiencing now with your children, or that you might experience in the future,
or someone,
or someone,
can provide someone with information.
Yeah, so I definitely think his experience is not a unique experience, but it's unique to him. So it is his experience, and we're going to really just jump in there and dive into it. So, Cam, if you just quickly want to introduce yourself without all that other stuff, like your elevator speech of who you are.
Sure. Yeah, I haven't given an elevator speech in a minute, but my name is Cam Justice. I grew up in Dublin, Ohio. Without all the other stuff, I currently go to Ohio State. And
State.
God, I've grown up here and I messed that up. I go to the Ohio State University. I also work for Youth to Youth. I was a kid in the program, and that is how I met Kevin and subsequently Tenisha. And that's all I got. I want to leave all the other stuff out for later.
You don't want to tell him that you like me more than him?
Ooh, geez, that's the first question I get, and I am immediately. This is a microcosm for my life. Look at this. I'm being pulled in two directions. Ooh, okay. Well, I'm gonna plead the fifth here.
Well, on that note, let's just jump into it. Now that everyone has heard how Cam drinks his water. He drinks water just like the rest of us, a little more loudly.
Oh my God.
I'm uncomfortable. But let's just dive into that. So, you were born, and boom, you're a whole person. What came of that? How were you, who were you raised by? Where were you raised? All that good stuff.
Yeah. So, again, grew up in Dublin, was born, and we lived in Hilliard for a little bit before I went to school, and then moved to Dublin shortly after my parents got divorced. My mom is way, way, way younger than my dad. My dad is 78 years old, an old black man. So that's a interesting dynamic that I'm sure we'll get into at some point. And my mom is 48. So that's interesting.
Okay.
So a 48-year-old white woman and a 78-year-old.
And this is when you were born. He was
essentially, yeah. He's been 78 my entire life.
Stop it.
He was 56 when I was born, which,
wow.
That's wild.
It's crazy. So, he was 10 years from retirement, and my mom was 4 years older than what I am now. So, I could make. My dad was. It's like you dating Parker.
Oh.
You can leave it out, but I just wanted to say it.
It's like me dating Ava.
Yeah, for sure.
So how did they meet?
Oh my gosh. So this is something that I've been asking for a long time and I've never gotten a straight answer.
Okay.
I don't know why that is, but to my knowledge, they had a mutual friend. So my mom worked with someone who bowled in the same bowling league as my dad.
Okay.
Now, if that isn't the oldest thing you've ever heard, I don't. Yeah. So, they were in the same bowling league. She shows up not to meet my dad. Like, she just shows up there, and I'm
For
sure
her bowling league, right?
Well, my mom wasn't in the bowling league. I think she came there to support her friend that she worked with.
Okay.
And then
was it like a retirement party for her friend?
I imagine so. Yeah.
Stop it.
And I imagine my dad just kind of swooned her, and the rest is history.
Nice.
Now, do you have any siblings?
Before we get into that, I think everyone should know as we listen to the rest of this that
I know where you're going with this.
Because he had a dad who was, 102 years old when he was born. He uses words like swooned. He swooned her.
He swooned her.
Let's look out for those gems as we go forward. And what was your question?
Do you have any siblings?
I have half siblings.
Okay.
They are all way older.
Okay.
Because my dad was married before he met my mom. So I have my oldest brother, who actually passed away when I was younger, would have been, 60. My next oldest brother, it turned 59 in December. So he's going to be 60 in December.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're doing the math at home, those are pretty close together.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And they all have kids who have kids. So I'm a great uncle by that standard. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's kind of like you said with drawing out a map for family members. We've had to do that for a lot of people to explain why I'm someone's uncle. So,
yeah.
Yeah, because your nephews are like 16 years older than you are.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Do they call you Uncle Cam?
Yes, which is great. Yeah.
I will never call my uncles uncle. You will not. We're 6 months apart, and you will not catch me calling them uncle.
I don't blame you. It's just funny because they're 30, almost 30 years older than me. Like they're 25 years older than me.
Not gonna happen.
It's insane.
Uncle Cam. That's great.
Yeah.
So you said you moved to Hilliard. You moved to Dublin.
Yes.
Why do you think after divorce?
Yeah.
Why do you think your mom chose Dublin specifically? How old were you when you moved there?
I would have been I moved there in going into kindergarten, and I know that my mom moved me there for the sake of the school district. Not that Hilliard was, there may have been something else that meant, moving out of Hilliard, but I know that she was looking for the good school district in Dublin, and that came along with, paying more for, where we lived, but she was okay with that because it put me in a good spot, at least educationally.
Okay.
And what was the where we lived? What was that?
So we always lived in an apartment. Again, single mom, working in the food industry. We weren't, bringing it in at crazy rates. So we just we lived in an apartment, which in Dublin is considered not great. Yeah. And I'm sure we can get into that more later. But yeah, so we just lived in apartments all growing up. And
so your mom didn't have any other children besides you?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope, just me. Which, yeah. I wonder all the time what that dynamic would be like if I did have siblings in the house. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good distinction to have, not the other siblings part, but the growing up in an apartment, because, from my perspective as a kid, places like Dublin and Pickerington and, the suburbs, like they didn't have, Pickerington was all farm when I was a kid, so strike that from the record.
Upper Arlington.
Places like Dublin and Upper Arlington and Powell, there were no such thing as apartments.
Right. And Gahanna at that time as well.
Not that there weren't apartments, but those were just like, if you lived in Dublin, you were a rich kid. So I'm sure I've thought that when I met you, regardless of your race.
Right.
Like you got money, you go to Dublin. But I think that shapes the conversation moving forward, for sure. So just getting into the hot and heavy, what you said kindergarten. So what were the racial dynamics like in Dublin? Because for me, I grew up on the south side of Columbus. I went to an elementary school called Stockbridge. For the first couple years, I didn't know any black kids, and then I met my best friend who, at that time, who happened to be black. We connected in the, I think, third grade, and that was like my first experience, and going over to his house, experiencing that culture, his culture. And, I had that experience in the second grade. I'm assuming as a mixed race, as a mixed kid, you met your first white kid a lot sooner than I met, the first black person.
For sure. The first kid I talked to in kindergarten was a white kid. His name's Andrew. And it's you're spot on. And that's the interesting thing though about Dublin is like I've always said Dublin is more diverse than I think folks realize. It's the inclusion part that's the issue for Dublin. Especially, so I went to Daniel Wright, which is like on the other side of the river, which is where all the apartments are, and and then the $400,000 houses that no one chooses to talk about. But
but they use that term. The
Over
other
the
side of the
river?
river.
So like the
there's way
bottoms and
more.
the tops.
The other side of the river. They would chant at football games when we were playing Scioto, all of which live across the river. All the students live across the river. River rats, like things like that. So and that's
We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there at some point. But
rats?
yeah, for sure.
We got a lot more racism to talk about
so
before
much,
we get there.
for sure. But I don't think especially going to Daniel Wright in elementary school and beyond. I don't think diversity was as much the issue as inclusion has been and seems to continue to be going forward. So
speaking more to that, what were the racial dynamics of the school, of the apartment complex, of the community as a whole?
In the apartments we lived in, it was everybody. My best friend was Mexican, is Mexican, and we hung around everyone. Like there was everybody you could think of. And in school, it was fairly similar, predominantly white, but there was what I would call a decent amount of diversity, and that played out kind of differently as we aged, and I'm sure ran into conflicts as we age, but yeah, it was fairly diverse.
And I think that's a lot similar to the community that we're in. Obviously, everybody from your apartment complex went to your school,
right?
And the community as a whole like that. But as there become less and less schools to go to, everybody's feeding into one school. So your apartment complex and the 400,000s are feeding into one middle school or two middle schools,
right,
and then the one high school or whatever. So I think that's the experience that we are in right now is Gavin and then next year Ava all go to an elementary school where white kids are the minority. But as they step up these next three schools, that will shift.
There
and
will be
eventually in the high school, though there will be a lot of minority students at the high school, that's 14 years from now, I don't know, or like 10 years from now, I don't know what the racial dynamics will look like, but right now they're, minority students are still the minority in the high school.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly what happened is you get kids from Daniel Wright and then kids from Indian Run, and Indian Run is pretty diverse as well, but certainly more white, and then another elementary school that is almost completely white, and you put them all in one space, and then Sells, the middle school I went to, is the more diverse, socioeconomically, racially, all of those things, and then you combine us at Kaufman with Carr, which is super white, super rich. So yeah,
and that's middle school.
Both.
Okay.
Yeah, both went into Kaufman, and so yeah, it's that's exactly what happened, and I imagine it's happening in every suburb. So,
so through that experience, can you pinpoint to a moment? Because what it sounds like is, for a while you were in a place where you felt accepted, you felt like there's a lot of kids here that look like me, You
rode the bus with people, and there was a sense of maybe community, but where did you feel like you were then the minority?
That's interesting. I'd say that happened in middle school.
Okay.
Because again, you start to combine more people from different experiences and different backgrounds. And, I remember we had talked about this at one point, having friends over for like a birthday party. And these are my rich friends that live in huge houses, and they come to my apartment, and it's just like, everybody's kind of like, what do we do? Like, what are we supposed to do? There's no like.
You mean your mom didn't rent out the clubhouse of the apartment at least?
Nope. I mean, it was just yeah.
Just packed
and
all the
I was
kids
like, we have
into
this
the
big
apartment like a
area.
normal family.
I was just like, we have this big area where we can play football, and they're like, but you don't have like this, and I'm like, nah, that's not. So
where's your swimming pool?
Right. That was like
we
the
have the
first.
Apartment swim. Yeah, no. Where's yours?
Where's your individual one? Like, you mean you have to swim with other people? Yeah. That was probably the moment where I was like, oh, I'm like really truly different.
Wow.
And so
And that was just based off of
Just
economics.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Alone. Yeah. So that was kind of the first time where I think I was able to internalize that.
Okay.
I'm sure there were plenty of other moments.
Yeah.
But that was the first time where I was like, oh, this is.
It was like your aha moment.
Yeah, and you get embarrassed. It's like an embarrassing feeling, and
For
there's
sure.
no way to control that stuff.
Yeah, I was just telling Gavin literally a couple of days ago that the moments his first day of third grade was last week, and I was telling him like I remember more from the third grade. Everything before the third grade, I remember more from the third grade because I had some positive moments that really stood out. I made a best friend. I can pinpoint the time I had new experiences. Like your friend, maybe I just wasn't as douchey as the kids that came to your house, your apartment, but I went to an environment that was completely different from me and was intrigued by it and was interested, and it didn't affect me in a way. I was like, this is cool. And I started thinking like, I was like less than, like, I wish I had a house full of people. I wish I had a house full of siblings. I wish I had 3 people in my room that I wish we all had bunk beds.
Bro.
You know,
Oh my God.
So it was, I think, maybe a little bit different, but I had these positive experiences in the third grade.
That carried on into high school.
For sure. But then everything before that, like all I remember is trauma. I remember the bad moments, and I was telling him like, I think you'll remember the time you got bullied in the first grade, but I think you're going to start to remember more from these years forward. And even though that was middle school, like I remember the really bad moments of everything like before high school and the really good moments. I don't remember any of it in between.
That was the worst when Gavin got,
Well, and don't get me wrong, there are certainly things I remember that now I would call them microaggressions, but like, again, those were things that in second, third grade you never thought about.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I to that point, there are certainly going to be things that
but
he
yet
remembers.
there was an archive in your memory.
Right.
That,
for sure.
Happened. You know, that's the thing. Like, you don't know until there's a label for it where you can where you can put it and store it.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely want to look back on some of those things. You know, now that you know.
Yeah.
We'll get to that point.
So I want to ask, at what point did your mom ever have a conversation with you about race?
Yes.
What was that like for you? And I'll tell you why I'm asking that.
Okay. So I'm trying to remember when it was. I was young enough that I don't remember every piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it wasn't something that was super vivid. But I just remember it being sort of a conversation about, dad's black and mom's white, and you are mixed, and so you don't look like me, and so things aren't gonna, pan out the way for, people aren't gonna treat you the same all the time as they do me. And stories about how, they'd both show up at a parent-teacher conference. They'd look at my dad, they'd look at my mom, then they'd look at me. Then they'd look at my dad, look at my mom, and look at me. And people couldn't put 2 and 2 together. So, we had conversations like that when I was young. And then, more, I guess, in-depth conversations about what that looked like, because I could process those things right after I had gotten my license. because I was on Bethel Road in Dublin, and a cop pulled out behind me, and I'm on the phone. Like, I had been on the phone with her, and I had told her, and then that's when we had that conversation of like, don't do anything sudden, don't this, don't that. So we've had a handful of conversations that have looked different over time, just kind of depending on what I was able to process at the time.
Yeah, she fed you as
Right.
it was appropriate to provide. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Which I think is maybe we're jumping ahead, needs to be totally different now in 2020.
Yeah, which is good for the context in which he was being raised, for sure.
It worked.
The time, I'm sorry, not the context, but the time in which he was being raised.
Yeah.
But we're in different times
for
now.
sure. Yeah, no, I hear that. Like, it's definitely shifted even in the past 6-7 years.
Right.
It's become more urgent,
Right.
feeling. Of course, it's always been urgent, but it feels definitely more immediate than it used to.
Speak
Not
now
saying she
type
didn't.
of thing.
Yeah.
Like, not saying she did anything wrong.
No.
She just I don't think America knew what America knows.
Right.
now.
There's no doubt in my mind that if I'm 16 now driving, this conversation would have already happened.
Right.
Well, and I also think too, though, like trying to have a conversation with your son, like there's conversations that I've tried to have with Gavin that he just was not trying to have with me. And they have been about like relationships or being biracial, but in society being viewed as an African American or a black boy, where he wasn't trying to hear it from me, but he was receptive from his dad, though his dad is white. Mm-hmm. So I think too, it's like raising a son, even in a 2-parent household, there's still conversations where he's not trying to have those with me.
Right.
He's just maybe not ready yet. Where we might think we need to have this conversation because he's mixed and we want him to identify correctly. We want to make sure he has his identity, and when do we start having that conversation? And he's like, doesn't know how to spell yet.
Right.
He's like, he can't grasp the concept of, you're telling me I'm black, but mom, dad, I'm both. Mm-hmm. Like I want all of you and all of mom. I'm both. Mm-hmm. Like, stop telling me that I'm not one thing. So I think that conversation definitely it is all based on each individual situation. But I guess what did you identify as in school?
It was always both. You are just as much. It's just like Gavin. Mm-hmm. You are just as much mom as you are dad. And sorry to go back, but like talking about the conversations that my mom had with me brings up what conversations my dad had with me about this stuff. And it's an interesting thing because of his age, the way I think he views, I guess, the seriousness of this stuff, because he literally like grew up in the civil rights era. So like,
he was in the military. Correct?
Yeah. And okay. He's seen some stuff and interacted with people that hated him just for the way he looked, whatever. But he's sort of in the same way my mom has, when even at this age has just kind of been like, oh, well, you might not get treated the same way. Like, it's this like almost afterthought because of, I don't know specifically why, but maybe because of how serious some of the stuff he dealt with was. And it just kind of feels like, okay, does this really compare to what I was dealing with, if that makes sense? So kind of in the same way, my dad didn't even address that stuff in a way that was like something I could take out of it. It was just like, well, this is going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think that can be, true in a lot of different areas of life, to where someone is in a situation where they're continually beat down, or where they continually feel less than, that it just becomes this thing that, like, I'd rather not talk about it regardless of who's going through it. There's a lot of things that you know, I had an uncle who was in the military, who was in Vietnam, and I was always interested, like, what did you experience? And he would never, like, he never talked about it, not even with his closest brothers, parents, anything. He never spoke about any of it, even if it was to benefit or help somebody else, you know? So that is an interesting piece of that.
Because it's re-traumatizing to some points. And it's like you can't control, like you couldn't control it no matter how much you want it to.
Cool. So you said I'm just as much mom as I am dad. I'm both. I'm mixed. And that was all through school, period.
Yep.
But that wasn't a bubble. So what would you choose? Like, both wasn't a bubble at your time.
Is that back then? Like,
yeah,
back then.
Would you do other?
What did I choose on the?
Like when you were taking your test.
Right. It really depended on the options that were given, because some allow you to check multiple.
Okay.
If I could check multiple, I would check both.
Okay.
If I had to pick one, I would pick other.
Okay.
Which is a whole can of worms.
Yes.
Why can't I pick what I actually?
Yes.
Right. So. That's maybe for another episode, but it was either I'm able to select multiple or I select other, and very rarely was it multiracial. It was just other.
Which I've never liked the term other. Like it, I despise it.
For sure.
But
like you said, maybe that's it.
Yeah, that's right.
That's another one. I know.
America's.
Yeah, for sure.
So you would select other if it was an option. Okay.
And like
in the moment though, that meant nothing to you.
Right, and I think it makes sense.
It does.
For a kid to pick. Oh well, this makes sense.
Yeah,
I see mom, I see dad. Like there's no reason for it to be any different for a kid.
It's like, oh, they must have forgot mine, so I'm just gonna do other.
Yeah, there's nothing to it other than, yep, half mom, half dad. That's it.
Let's open it up.
All right, well, let's get into the real deep stuff of, I think, what our kids, what other kids growing up in these suburban communities can experience, because it is so vastly different. Me just hearing some of Cameron's stories, me being a little bit more involved here in the Pickerington community, it is so vastly different than my experience growing up in Columbus, where in my schools, as a white kid, I was often a little bit under, like, in school, the minority. There were definitely a little bit more than half black students at my schools, and racial, like,
I mean, your school had more black people than my school.
Yeah. Like, racism it didn't happen, because, I mean, maybe it did, right? But in my experience, no white kid is going to, run off at the mouth or say some crazy stuff.
You were the minority.
Because, it was you versus a lot of other people. So no matter how you felt, no matter how you were raised, no matter your parents' views, like, you kept it tucked. Mm-hmm. You kept that tucked away, and you knew that the N-word, you knew you better not say it, right? Mm-hmm. You would get called out, and it was made known early in my school experience. Like, I don't know why, but I understood the racial dynamics of things that that I can say, I can do, so I am just assuming it was not the same experience.
Yeah, and it's crazy because in my experience, it's tons of microaggressions, right? Tons of things that you're like, that doesn't quite sound right. Like, that doesn't feel like that should be something you said. But you can't quite pin why. You can't, at least when I was in high school, couldn't pin why.
And this is when a lot of those things really started. Not that they didn't happen before, but you started feeling some type
That's
of way
when they
about
materialized for
in
me.
high
That's
school?
when that's when I was like, what?
So what were you doing in high school? Like, were you involved in any like extracurricular activities? Were you in any like clubs?
I'm so glad you asked that, because when you were mentioning being like a numerical minority, like what stands out to me is I was a baseball kid.
Okay.
So baseball is overwhelmingly white. Mm-hmm. And to your point, when you feel like you're a majority, you're more likely to say what you feel, think, mm-hmm. whatever. And then you put it in an even more, white dominated space of baseball, where I was the darkest kid on any team I ever played on.
You were the darkest?
Yes.
Wow.
Then it's, that stuff is bound to happen. So it's almost the opposite. I've been in spaces where people are even more emboldened to just say whatever because it's me. Like I'm the only person mm-hmm. that can react to something like that. So, that shaped a lot of the interactions that I had, especially in high school.
Well, speak to that. Speak to some of those experiences that stand out as trauma for you, because I think those are things that are happening every day, mm-hmm. and there are people that have kids just like you, mixed black, or white.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
They have white kids who are perpetuating some of these things. They have black kids or or kids of color that are experiencing these things. What are these things? What are some of those things you experienced?
Yeah. So I'll start by saying there was just rampant conservatism in those spaces, and so a lot of them were just regurgitating what they heard their parents say or what they heard the news. So there were a lot of those like comments about political things that are in a lot of ways racist and things like that. Those were the majority of things.
And this is a time when we had a black president.
Right. Yeah. So there was plenty of racist stuff towards President Barack Obama as well. And those were the majority of incidences, were just political type things. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Now the most vivid and the most, telling things for me and in some ways traumatizing things for me were in baseball spaces. So one specific instance, I was in the dugout. We had just gotten done with like warm up stuff. Coach is still out on the field, and some of my teammates are in the dugout. And there's like this like rope that helps like line the base paths. And so they grabbed one of those, and my friends started pushing. Well, what I thought were my friends started pushing me. One grabbed me and said, "We got another one, boys," and fake wrapped that rope around my neck, right? That happened in multiple incidences. I was in Kentucky for a baseball trip. We were in the pool, hot tub, whatever, and there's like the net that cleans up the stuff, but there's also like a metal pole with a ring around it. Same thing. We got another one, boys. Grabbed me, wrapped that thing around, and jokingly fake lynched me, right? So
did you ever tell your mom?
So I'm glad you asked that as well, because I told her that recently, probably a year or so ago. And obviously, like, my mom, she says what she wants to say. So she kind of lost it and was like, well, we need to tell someone. And I'm like, well, like what, what's going to come of it now? Yeah. Also, that's the reason I didn't tell her then, is because she flies off the handle. Our coach finds out about it through her, and then.
Did you ever tell your coach then?
No, because then it's what opportunities do I possibly lose if I'm a snitch? If some of these really good players on our team, it's me and 3 other guys that are some of the better players on the team. What happens if they get disciplined? Do I get seen as, whatever? And
you did feel that at that time.
Yeah.
It wasn't just
like, oh, well,
yeah, right.
It was like obviously embarrassing, upsetting, but then you're like, what can I really do that doesn't impact me in the long run?
Yeah. And did you have thought, did you convince yourself like otherwise, like they're my friends, like they mean well.
They're just joking, which in hindsight, it's like, that can't be a joke. Like that's just not a thing to joke about. But in that moment when those are people that you see as friends, it's like, oh, they had to have been joking. So, and that's the thing. Like, again, I'm not going to fight them. Yeah. One, because there's tons of them. Two, I can't fight. And three,
you're still trying to mentally figure out what's going on.
And then I become the angry black kid. Yeah. Like, what does that do to my chances when I was like, oh, I could play college base? Like, it's just, it didn't make sense for me at the time to do much about it.
Right. And this is, you know, and I think a good point here is this is happening at the second more diverse school that Dublin has. Right. And just imagine what it looks like for the black kid that goes to Jerome, which is all rich kids. Right. There isn't an apartment complex that feeds into Jerome. Right. Like, so, I mean, I know there's one specific instance that, you know, we had a student who went to Jerome that pulled up to an overnight at work. And this is right when President Obama was elected. He had President Obama like bought it, and there was no Amazon at the time, so you really had to find this. Like he had a doll of Barack Obama hanging from a noose in his window, right? And had no understanding of why it was racist, right? And he had to be educated by really good friends that he had made while he was in this program that were black that, you know, obviously went off. And, you know, that culture is rampant through I think these schools because of parents, because of things like that. And that was something that was allowed every day at school before he pulled up into our overnight. You know, like he got to drive to school every day. His parents saw his car in the driveway every day with Obama hanging from a noose, and nothing was ever said. So I just feel like as a community, we have to, I think, put the pressure on, especially in these suburban communities, especially as a white parent, that this stuff isn't okay, because it all just gets swept under the rug because our black students, mixed students, students of color are still minorities and don't want this backlash, you know, coming on them in any aspect, sports, school, more attention, what have you. You all right? Tenisha got the tears in her eyes over here.
Oh my God. I could not. Oh.
Well, and it's interesting because just looking at me and just knowing you grew up in Dublin, it's like, well, how bad could it really be? You know, and that's understandable, but there's also like a lot of this really overt stuff that goes on. That's not like it's very direct. There's no beating around the bush with the type of racism that is seen in those spaces a lot of times. And again, it's just, I think a lot of it is just ignorance, not intentional. Like, I know this is messed up, so I'm going to do it. It's like what you said with the Obama doll. Like, I don't know if it was like,
it wasn't and I truly believe that it, because I knew the kid. Right. I truly believe it wasn't, I hate black people. You know, it was just some stupid thing, but nobody ever taught him otherwise.
And that's the difference.
You know, for whatever reason, a black man, especially a president, he thought it was okay to hang from a noose in his windshield, right? Luckily for him, that overnight was in Upper Arlington and not, you know, where our office actually was at the time. So,
How are you gonna? I mean, because it's gonna happen, right? And it may not be. It may be similar to me, where it's like way after the fact that you find out about something like this. But let's just say it's, you know, the day after something like that happens. How are we handling this?
I have exercised my Second Amendment right. So
that checks out.
I mean, I'm very much. Gavin would say I'm more aggressive, and that's just because I'm so like protect. Like I still go and sit outside with my kids, and if I'm not out there, I'm begging Kevin to go out there, and he's 8. Like he's 8, and his friends are riding the neighborhood, and he just got his radius extension. Like I'm not protective, but I need to know where you are. I need to be able to see you, and I need to make sure you're okay.
Right.
And that's still the context of when he goes to school. Like I told Kevin, I'm like, man, I wish he had a cell phone, because I just want to make sure that you are okay. And I think for me, I know that we're doing what we know is best, because Gavin had made a comment to me when we were outside talking about this mirror that I'm going to paint. Gavin told me I need to see that right. That one of his friends was talking about being the cool kid, and how like you have to be bad to be the cool kid, and Gavin was saying, no, you don't have to be bad to be the cool kid, you just have to be you and follow directions. And the boy was like, well, maybe that's why you have so many friends, because you don't feel compelled to be bad to be the cool kid. And I was like, that was kind of like the aha moment, like maybe we are kind of doing something right now, and it's working, and he feels confident in who he is. But I'm very much
but that's what I think is interesting too, is you two have very different ways of handling those things. Let me handle this, jokingly, of course, but like, let's handle this situation externally. Let's worry about the kid that's causing the problem, kid or kids that are causing the problem. And let me make sure my kid is okay as well. Like, which is important. Both of those things are huge, because it's great to deal with the problem, but then like what happened to your kid in the process?
Right.
You know?
And that's a good point, because Tenisha can't go to the school, because even I jokingly obviously said that, but I can go to the school and regulate my emotions to have the conversation with the teacher, which has already happened.
Yeah, he did that because I couldn't go.
In the first grade, when he was being bullied because he had friends, because he got good grades, because the teachers liked him, because he had nice shoes and nice hair, and he, was getting bullied for all of the reasons that anyone would get bullied for. He, I guess bullying is different in 2020. You bully the kids that have their stuff together. Cool. You bully the cool kids. That's how you get cool, is by being mean, bullying the other cool. But anyways, like, she was like, he held that in for a week and a half.
Like, he wasn't eating lunch. Like, I'm like, why are you hungry? Like, this isn't normal. Why is your food still halfway? Like, why are you rushing? What's happening? And he would not tell me. And I wasn't being aggressive, but I was just very like, why? What's happening? And he told his dad.
Right.
Yeah, he came to me in tears one morning. I just don't want to go to school. And this is in first grade, And I can think back to those moments. Like, I switched schools because kids, not because obviously I'm white, but because kids wrapped a rope around my neck. And, it had nothing to do with race. It was just like, we want to kill you. So that was just.
Thank God they didn't.
But I switched, that was in the first grade.
First grade.
And he's having those same experiences, but she was out of her mind that morning.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Crying, wanted to.
Hysterical.
Right. And
I could not control my emotions. I tried to, and I just couldn't.
Yeah. But I think that it plays out probably similarly if something was to ever happen racially, because my goal, not only make sure my kid is okay, but somebody has to know it. Like, we have to start having this conversation at the school.
I will always appreciate his language teacher, Mrs.
Yeah, so appreciative that you remember.
Wait, I know her name, Mrs. Hold on, what's her name?
Yeah, she's great.
She's awesome.
What's her name? Miss Radnoff. Mrs. Radnoff.
Or with a D, whatever.
Radnoff, because she would go outside with Gavin, and she like tried to intentionally get him to like engage with his.
Well, and that's it, right? Because if we only dealt with Gavin, right, and told him next time he does it, punch him in the face, or
that's me.
Next time he does it, turn the other cheek, whatever. If we only dealt with him and weren't okay with snitching, weren't okay with figuring out, making sure that others know about this situation, it never goes away.
Right.
But because we were able to have, and by we, I mean me, because I was able to have the conversation with the teacher, because Gavin was a good student, because all of these other things, they were able to, I mean, they started having lunches together. Like, they had systems in place at the school, you know, to deal with some of that. They just had to know about it. I don't know that racism is the same thing. And by I don't know that racism is the same thing, I mean, racism isn't the same thing.
Racism isn't the same thing.
But maybe by the time he's in high school, if parents in the community continue to stay active, if we continue to make progress in these smaller ways that aren't this like global change but like these
community
PTAs,
changes.
community ways that we're putting pressure on the school districts, like that's when maybe some of that looks different.
We're not even going to get into our school district. Let's just go ahead and proceed, because I just can't even.
Yeah, so I think now what we want to do is, I think you spoke to how you felt in the moment, how you felt as a kid going through this situation, how probably a lot of kids and a lot of kids of color feel while going through these situations in their suburban schools.
Can I ask him a question real quick? Were there multiple like biracial children in your school? I'm not familiar with Dublin at all.
Not a lot.
Okay.
I'm trying to think. Not a lot.
Really?
Not a lot.
Okay.
More, certainly not biracial males.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
A lot more biracial females.
Okay.
Now that I think about it. Yeah.
Okay.
So very few generally, but yeah, even fewer biracial males.
I didn't even think about that. Okay.
I didn't know, like, I straight up, like, I can't recall a time when I understood that, like, biracial existed. I mean, like,
Huh?
nah, like, I didn't because at where I was at until
You for sure.
yeah, but I'm talking about like grade school through middle school. Like, every kid, if I saw Cam as a kid, I would have thought he's black. Until Cam would have told me that my mom is white, I wouldn't have otherwise known that he was black and white.
Okay, I see what
You
you're
know,
saying.
like at where I didn't live in a neighborhood, I didn't, grow up around a bunch of people. It wasn't until I started having experiences in school. And then throughout my elementary school experience, every black kid that I knew was a black kid, like they weren't biracial. And then when I got in, I remember in 6th grade, there's a girl saying like, my dad is white. And I'm like, bro, your dad is not white. I'm like, no, and to my defense, no one believed her. And we never saw her dad, but I feel bad for her now.
Stop it.
Sorry, Jorana. That was her name.
Jorana?
And everybody used to say, Geronimo!
Oh, that's awful.
What were we talking about bullying?
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Okay, so
Yeah.
we're going to go ahead and...
We're going to go back. We're not going to bully.
We're going to will it in.
We're going to wheel it in?
And reel it in.
Or reel it in.
Reel it in.
Yeah, that's...
God, man, I shouldn't have took my mom's English class. Okay.
Yeah. So we're going to transition to keep talking about school.
Scoop.
Now we're gonna, I think, just look back on. You talked about your experiences as a kid, then how you felt, but now knowing what you know, looking back on these situations, you spoke about the microaggressions even in elementary school. What are some of those things that just come to mind that were just wrong now and then?
Well, he spoke about the news.
All right. Well,
let's just not go. No, I can't.
All right.
I can't
We can't go there anymore.
No more.
So now we want to look back.
I mean, unless you want to.
I mean, that's the biggest thing.
That's the biggest thing.
That's the
okay.
most.
I don't want to take anything away from you.
That is the most, obviously,
I can't,
shock factor thing.
You
out of all of
you
those
brought
things.
it in for sure. I can't imagine. So why'd you wait so long to tell your mom?
I think a lot of it was this. Because I know how my mom reacts to things like
right.
that, and I know that she would lose her mind.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that wouldn't be good in high school.
So how did you manage your own emotions? Because I'm all about assisting to manage my son's emotions.
Didn't
okay.
just said, well, that happened, and all of the things that came along with it. It wasn't pretending that being upset about it and all of those things didn't happen. It was just like, well, they're my teammates. I'm going to spend the next however long with them. What can I do?
Did you internalize that at all?
Oh, for sure. It was the most concrete moment of like, you are different.
Mm.
Before that, it's like, okay, but this was like, you're different and they know it. And they're okay with showing you that you're different in ways that aren't nice ways. Because, it's okay to acknowledge differences, but in that way, right? So
what grade was it?
That was my freshman year.
And
then sophomore year was the Kentucky incident, which was the same, similar thing.
So that's years.
Huh?
Now we're talking years.
2 years.
Yeah.
You're experiencing this.
For sure. And
this is the one big trauma.
Right. That's the big thing. And not to mention the constant... I mean, and the N-word was commonplace, like in that space. And
to you or just in general, like
both. Just
to like motivate you, right?
Could you imagine? No, but there was a lot of like, it was just the negative thing to say about. It could be about a white person, and it's like, this is the negative thing that I'm going to say.
Now, big question though. Did they have their in card?
God, I haven't told you that story. That's incredible.
You can get your in card in the
to do what
in the
Dublin,
suburbs.
Yeah.
So if you're a white kid and
to say to do what?
To say the N-word, you can get your in card.
Yeah,
in Bexley and Pickerington and Dublin.
Stop
white
it.
girls can do it.
Stop it.
Only white girls actually.
What?
So none of the guys were
None
able
of the
to.
guys. Well, in Bexley you can get your in card. In
Are y'all
Pickerington,
serious?
You can get your in card. Yeah. Somebody has to give it to you though. A black person has to give you the.
And typically they give it to you when you're around 10 or 12.
I can't do it. I can't.
And it carries over. It's an eternal membership.
Yeah. Forever. You're forever allowed to say the N-word. And you can, if someone is upset about you
can
saying
double
it,
down and say,
double down.
I have my in card. You can't be mad at me.
Is this
why
Uno?
are you being sensitive?
What?
Yeah,
no,
this is something. Oh,
we're being sarcastic, but this is
something
serious.
that I experienced.
Are you kidding me?
A month and a half ago.
No. Okay. Jesus.
Anyway,
and please don't interpret laughter as
this is how we deal with being really uncomfortable.
Yeah, we talked about that in episode series 2. Okay, so wait a minute.
Clearly uncomfortable.
This is not.
This is gonna have to be broken into 2 episodes.
This is gonna have to be edited because this is just too much for me to handle. So okay, so they're using the N-word in regular dialogue. Is this like in the school, like with your friends, or just straightly on the field?
On the bus, on the way to baseball games.
Baseball.
Around all of the adults.
Around the adults?
Of course. They can't not hear it.
Yeah, I'm sure they can't not hear it. Yeah.
But they don't acknowledge it,
right.
and they ignore it.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're
on the baseball
Because
bus mostly, and in the dugout, things like that.
So we have selective hearing.
Is when those things happened.
So were there ever any teachable moments about diversity? Can we speak to that? Any teachable moments?
But not in the direction that you want to hear.
So in general,
yeah.
Any teachable moments about diversity where your coaches or someone above you identify that everyone on this team doesn't look like you, nor do they act like you, nor do they have the social economic stance as you, but we're all here together. Is that a thing?
No, is the short answer. The long answer is there was a moment where we were in the dugout my senior year. My baseball coach, you couldn't have no tattoos, no piercings, no long hair, right? Was the
tattoos?
Idea. No, not at the time.
Okay.
No tattoos, no piercings, no long hair. My hair would have been way too long for his liking, right? His idea is he wants you all to look uniform going out onto the field, whatever. Mm-hmm. I don't disagree. It's a cool look whenever, whatever. But we were playing Westland a couple days, after we were talking, and he was like, they come out on the field and they all look different from each other. We all look the same. Like, why would you want to look different from one another? And we were like,
oh, that's a lesson in diversity.
Yeah, I was like, wow. He was basically like, yeah, they have black kids. We don't have any. So aren't we, because he didn't think, he didn't.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Which 100%, he saw you as black, but he taught himself over time that you were white.
Mm-hmm.
So that he could accept you.
Yep.
On his team. Because you were a good enough player for him to say, he's a white kid. Are there conversations that you wish would have been had that would have helped you navigate these situations of microaggression, of racism? Are there conversations
of
that
just
you
being aware of who you are as a person?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, again, knowing what I know now, would be I would like to have conversations about what those things mean. So what the microaggressions mean, why they're not, all of those things, dissecting those things and where they come from and whatnot.
So like microaggression, what?
Outwardly racist stuff. Yeah, all of those things, right?
Okay.
As a way to, when those things happen, me not just being like.
So when do you think those topics should be introduced? Do you feel like they should be introduced taking into context the child, but for you specifically?
Yeah, I think it's tough because you don't want to
jade.
You do want to get ahead of it, right?
Yeah.
Presumably you'd like to get there before it happens, right? But also, like I said earlier, there were times where my mom was having conversations with me like, it doesn't make sense to talk to me about a microaggression at 7. Like because it goes in one ear and out the other. So it's like, I guess the short answer is finding that sweet spot between early enough to get ahead of it before they experience it for the first time, and also them being able to understand and have a working definition of it. It would have been going into high school, which I think is a good transition time anyway.
For sure.
Especially in relation to this episode, like we talked about earlier, in suburban communities where high school is a microcosm
of life,
of all of the other communities.
Okay.
Is a microcosm of microaggressions.
Why all black kids sit at the same table?
Yeah,
great book.
I read that one. And by great book, I mean it was hard to get through.
But it was a good book. But I think that's true because also you have to think about, I agree with you. Like, I feel like there's a different conversation that has to happen with your child going into high school than like going into elementary school and middle school, because not only are they going into, you can still be in high school at 22, God forbid, but there's also different levels of freedom that comes apart. Right. Like your child, though I want to be with my children when they go out with their friends or when they go out to football games, they're not going to want me there. And I have to respect that to a certain stance, but I also need to educate them to know that this is okay and this isn't okay and this is what this, educate them on where they live in their community, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's the thing. elementary school, I think the worst thing I remember was I told a kid I was black, and he was like, "Oh, I just thought you were white with a good tan." Like, that's not emotionally.
You can swallow that,
right? That's not emotionally damaging,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Middle school, it that stuff progresses. So yeah, I think high school is the good time to kind of catch it before it gets to the point where you're changing the way people feel, think about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
When you look back, was there, so that was a big moment, the baseball situation, but then can you think of another moment that really sent you in a different direction of like finding yourself? So you had these experiences that told you you're different. Now, did that propel you to try to find who you were more, or did it just so happen that you found yourself in a specific way?
I think the instance for me was being out of Dublin, because you're not surrounded by people that are, that feel some type of way about this stuff. Like, again, conservatism is just running rampant in Dublin, and it suppressed a lot of my views about politics and about my identity and all of those things. So leaving Dublin was like now let me go learn about myself, because I was free to do that.
Yeah.
Without, if I were to do, this isn't a thing that we did, but if I were to do a project about my identity in school, right, that would not have gone over well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I was free to do those things outside of that space where I felt like it was being, ridiculed. So you say being outside of Dublin, what is that? You walk into a space outside of Dublin and you feel that way. Why? Because you were immediately accepted? Because there were other people that looked like you? Because what? Because regardless of what the people looked like, they were open to listening about that experience. Like
listening to you.
Yes.
About your experience.
Yeah.
Okay.
And understanding that, not just listening to refute it and talk about why, whatever I was saying was was a overreaction or whatever.
Yeah.
Regardless of what those people looked like, they were willing to listen and understand those things. And that's something that in a lot of ways Dublin never provided, because I know that Dublin isn't completely full of racist people. Yeah. And I think the past couple months have shown that. The interactions I've had with people that I didn't even realize felt the way I do about some of these things, but they're so bogged down by the majority of people who are conservative that they can't let that voice be out there. It's the same thing with me. Mm-hmm. I never felt comfortable with that, so it didn't happen until I left that space.
Cool. So I think this is a good point to move forward and think about and talk about now looking forward, looking ahead. I know that you actively want change. And for me, you've went about it a little bit differently than maybe I have went about it. There are spaces where I think change is needed, and I have said, well, I'm not worried about like if change is needed, but like I'm done with that space. I've moved on. Like Capital University, I've moved on. Change is needed at Capital University. Capital University's police department is racist. There's nothing I want to do as an alumni to improve the situation. Like maybe I should, but I really just don't care about Capital University. Like sorry about all the kids that go there right now. You have taken a more mature stance.
Way more mature.
See, that's the thing, though. I don't know if my stance is more mature. I think it's more selfish. I sit here and say, whatever space I go into, regardless of how I feel about the group that I'm trying to affect, I know that I can have some sort of impact on it. So if I'm not going to do it, I've kind of figured out that not a lot of people are. So why would
for
not?
Sure. No one, I mean,
right.
Not too many people are going to be yelling in police officers' faces.
Right. So who's going to do that?
Yeah.
And it's more of like oh, I'll go do it, like kind of thing. I don't know. I appreciate you saying that it's more mature, but I don't know.
But what we can clearly see is that all of these experiences that you've had in this community in Dublin have led you to a point to say, I want to influence change in Dublin, which is no longer your community.
Right.
Right? Like, you don't live there. You don't pay taxes there. You just went to school there.
Right.
A lot of people would move on. Like, I don't live there. That was a horrible time. That was a bad experience. You had a lot of good experiences, but a lot of the experiences were bad. It was racist.
And
I know what I know now.
identified that it needs to be a change.
Right. And you said, I'm going to go make a change. So you are, what is it? You're on the Dublin Police Chief's task force? What is it?
Advisory committee.
Advisory committee.
Yes.
And you're advising on
What?
So policies, procedures, a bunch of training requirements, things like that, and recommendations for those things. So myself and the Honorable Judge Dwayne Maynard and a handful of other folks will be working to hopefully get some much needed change to some of the policies that are in Dublin's police department, with my hope of them then taking that to other police departments that aren't doing their jobs as well as Dublin is. Because in a lot of ways, Dublin police aren't the issue, if you will. But hopefully them saying, okay, look at what we did. Now you all do something about it, is kind of the hope. So
what led to that, and what has your experience been thus far with being a part of that change, which I'm sure your hope, yes, the broader community, but obviously we're talking top down. We're pretty high at the top of Dublin when we're talking about advising the police chief, and which can influence school climate and school culture as well as as it's like, top down and whatnot.
Are there police officers in Dublin school? Okay, because I know they removed that contract with Franklin County.
Yeah. So yes, they are there.
Right? They did remove that from Franklin.
Yeah, from Columbus. From CCS, right?
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
They are in the schools. That is a generally widely accepted thing in Dublin. A lot of people, lots and lots of people are for that. In my experience with SROs in Dublin, I'm like, whatever, like, cool. I don't really care. Like, they're not the issue in the same way.
Yeah.
So I'm a little less bent out of shape about it.
Okay.
But it's interesting thought though. What are they there for then? If everyone's okay with it,
why are they there?
Why are they like it? If there are no, Well, I guess we won't get into the reason that they're there is because these rich people want the black kids that are in their schools to be policed.
Yeah. School to Prison Pipeline, episode 6.
We won't.
Coming soon.
I guess we won't dive into that. But you're a part of this to make change. How did that come about?
So I went to a protest in Dublin the week.
That was after, right? After you were protesting downtown, right? Because I remember I seen you before that.
Yeah, that was 2 days after that downtown protest.
So can we backtrack?
For sure.
What compelled you to go to the downtown ones? Because I'm going to be honest, when Kevin told me that you were downtown protesting, I was like, what?
Tenisha wouldn't let me go.
Oh, that's sad.
I wouldn't let him go because I know my husband and he would end up in jail. And
sure.
And we can't afford that right now.
Yeah.
Or back then, because I wasn't sure that I was even going to have a job. So what compelled you to be like, I need to be down there. I need to be involved. I need to be connected. Like, what was the pivot? Because, and I'm asking that because, and no disrespect by no means, but going back to 9th grade and 10th grade, you were very silent.
Right.
And now you're what? You're in your junior year of
17th
college,
year.
right?
He's a fifth year.
I'm a fifth year.
Fifth year.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm old.
Excuse me. His 5th year. And now.
She did 7.
Huh? No. And so, so basically, like, what made you say, like, I need to do something. I need to be a part of the change.
Well, the biggest thing is just me having learned things over the years just made me say, okay, yeah, I need to figure this out. And I think
You must not have been paying attention during all the Black History classes you took in school.
Yeah, all of those. The none that I took.
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah, do better. So you learn things.
Yeah. And yeah, I think my experiences did shape those things, and seeing those play out in the real world made me say, all right, yeah, I gotta do something about this. So, yeah, I went out there and then got pepper sprayed in the face. That's not fun. Have either of you been pepper sprayed?
No.
Sucks.
Not
I
in
stay
the
in the
face,
house.
but
Yeah,
in a part of it.
It got
States
me.
on 71.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
I don't leave the house.
It's not great. So then that made me even more angry, like in a good way. It was like, all right, yeah, I see you. And then a couple days later, went to this protest in Dublin, and they did it the right way. They being the police, they weren't being awful. And the police chief was there. He said some words, and then some people were kind of nudging me and were like, go say something. And then I said something, and then we talked, and he gave me his card, and he seems genuine about making some sort of positive change. What that looks like for him, I don't know, because my idea of positive change and his might be very different. But he at least seems very open to that stuff. So after talking to him a couple times, he brought back this committee that was supposed to be started when he became chief, or before he was chief, and he decided to bring it back. And I figured I can use some of my skill sets to help make some change on the policy level.
Okay, that's good.
The one big thing I think that a lot of people saw this summer, if they follow you, was the moment Tenisha's talking about, where you're kind of in the front lines yelling to, not at, the officer that was in front of you. What was that? What were you saying?
I was scared
what was
for
that
you.
situation?
I'm not gonna lie. I was telling Kevin.
Yeah, that was...
it was in that moment that I might have not handled it very well.
Yeah.
And how long after that? Were you pepper sprayed because you were yelling? Or that was a lot later?
That was after.
All right.
That was after I been pepper sprayed. And again, like I try and focus on the things that I do like somewhat well, and provide a somewhat unique way of approaching things. So after we got pepper sprayed, we kind of moved forward again to the edge of the sidewalk, and I was up front, and so some police officers had their bikes and whatnot lined up, and I just wanted to talk to them, like very objectively, not an incredible amount of emotion, whatever, just talk about things, because whatever. And I was talking at this one police officer, and he kept looking to the left and right of me, never looked at me. And, he had his glasses on. I could see his eyes, whatever. And I just kept saying, like, can you at least acknowledge me? Like, this is the whole issue, is that you won't acknowledge that I'm here. Like, so whatever. And then they had to move down, and he goes, Jones, we're going to move down, which that was great because I had the officer's last name, so I could keep yelling his name at him and saying things. So then I just appealed to the guy's emotions a little bit and his humanity, and just said, hey, you're scared right now, and I get it. There's a lot of angry people out here, but that's just a glimpse into what it's like to be black in America. So blah, blah, blah. And, talked at him for a few minutes, and was just like, can you just acknowledge me? That's all I'm asking. And he... if you weren't looking at him, you wouldn't see it, but he just little tiny nod, right? And I was like, it made me realize that he's there, he's hearing me, but he's more afraid of what the people to the left and right of him think than anything else. He doesn't care. He may very well agree with me, but he's so bought into this police culture that he's afraid of what the people around him are going to think.
Yeah. I know someone who's married to the police culture to people, and it's real.
It supersedes race and socioeconomic status, all of that. It's insane. I don't know anything like it.
Yeah.
So through all of these experiences you've had, growing up and as an adult, becoming more involved, learning more about, history, learning more about society, learning more about racism, systemic racism, all of it, what has changed for you, I guess? Like, you know, has your identity changed?
Do you still identify yourself as other?
I identify as Black.
Okay.
I've had a handful of conversations that have helped me realize, and some examples that I've come up with on my own. One of which being, if we were segregated today, whose side would I be on? You know, that, and those things make it far more clear to me. So in that way, yeah, my identity has changed. It's also, you know, when I was younger, it was like, this stuff, like, how is it going to affect me? But then, you know, I start to see those things and I'm like, oh, that affects me. So
this is how it has affected me.
Right. Yeah. You know, in middle school, it's just like, oh, well, like, it is what it is. This isn't going to mean anything. Yeah. But it has, and still, you know, and will as stuff moves on. So, yeah, I guess in those ways, those things have changed. And yeah.
You know, this conversation could literally go on hours and hours
Forever.
Upon hours. And we're not even scratching the surface of, you know, racism in 2020 and what that looks like for you now and the school you attend now. We're not even going to go there. We're not even going to go to what it looks like at Ohio State. We're not going to go what it looks like, you know, when you're driving. Like, we're not even jumping into any of that. Because, you know, coming back to our audience of listeners and, you know, their investment in this is in hearing this is thinking about the experiences that maybe they've had or that their kids are going to have, you know, white, Black, or other, you know, regardless of race, and what they need to be thinking about as kids grow up. What would you say to them? And then second part, after that, what do you want my mixed babies to know?
To parents generally, I think what's important to understand is that what your children say, and you know, which typically comes from things that you say, are very literally impacting kids' identities. If I hadn't left the space that I was in, or just chose not to explore things more, I would have had a really warped perception of who I am, what my worth is, all of those things, because of the experiences I had specifically in high school. Understand that your role in your kid's life impacts very significantly in some cases the way in which kids view themselves, not just in that space, but long term. So that's what I would say to parents that are listening to this. That's the big thing. And then the thing that I would want your kids to know is that no matter what anybody says, that they are amazing and so talented and incredible. And there will be people that try to minimize that stuff and try and change the way you view those things. But sort of back to what you do to take care of your kids when those things happen, no one can take those things away. And just, those are really my things. Because those have been tested and they will be tested for them. Yep. Again, in these really like subtle ways, but also in very, very outward ways.
And I just encourage other parents to really like look at where you're at and what your kids need to navigate the situations and the places that they're going to be in, especially when it comes to race. This year has put me in a place where I do want to like be a part of decision making in the community. Like I attended a school board meeting, you know what I'm saying? And the community that my kids live in, that they have to navigate school in.
Yeah.
These are things that I need to start doing more actively because I know that my voice can be heard and may be representative of other voices that are not comfortable speaking up. So I encourage other parents in my community and beyond to start being more active in those situations, even if it's hard. It takes time away from other things. Like we have to invest in our kids and in our communities because it's so easy to just let this race stuff fly under the radar.
Like if you don't invest in it now, I am a firm believer that at some point in their life you will be investing in it.
Yeah.
Like regardless.
Right.
So
money, time, circumstances.
Yep. So though it may be uncomfortable for you, if it was genuine, like if you understand and it was genuine, meaning that it's genuine to you to understand who you are and to understand who your children are, then you understand the importance of conveying this message.
Right.
Well, and I think you're seeing that with my mom. Like my mom was able to, she provided for me in a way that put me in a place to be successful in terms of school and whatnot. It also had its negative impacts socially and whatnot. But she was able to kind of skate by and not be racist, right? And just kind of cool it. And now she's starting to come into this fold where she's like, oh, I need to address this in my circles.
Yeah.
So I think you're absolutely right. Like at some point, you're going to have to come to terms with it and figure it out, whether you want to or not.
The racist people, the white people, the ignorant people, the people that are not inclusive, they're at the table, right? They're at the school board meetings. They make sure that our black principals don't keep their jobs. They make sure of that. They make sure demotions happen. They're the boosters that pay these football programs. They make sure they have the right coaches in place. They are at the table.
Their presence
their
is
voice,
present.
Their presence is present. Their voice is being heard.
Yes.
And we also need to make sure that our voice is heard. Maybe, it's harder. Maybe it's harder. We have less time. We're getting off work. We're not single. We're not stay at home. We don't have stay at home parents or jobs that allow complete flexibility, but we have to figure out ways to be at the table and make sure that our voices are heard so that not only our students, but our kids can grow up in a different environment than the environment that Cam experienced. And I thought it was really important to have him on because he bridges the gap between between me and my kids, and my experience, Tenisha's experience is not going to be the same as theirs. It's probably not going to be the same as his. I hope not, but it's going to be closer to his than it was mine. And I think that's true for a lot of the people listening, is that his situation, I see it with the kids that I work with right now. They are still going through the same things that he's going through, even though it was only 5 years ago for you,
right.
7 years ago that you're experiencing this level of racism and aggression within your school, and 6 years is nothing, So 6 years from now, my son's going to be in high school, or almost.
Then that provides, if anything, an avenue for Gavin. Right. Or even Ava to have a conversation with Cam and feel comfortable knowing that, he's lived this experience.
Right. And he did say, Dad, make sure you tell Cam I said hi.
No, my Gavin.
So we appreciate you being here. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too.
I think it is a conversation that in these communities isn't heard as much. I think people move to these communities to
for
get
opportunity.
away. You know what I'm saying?
They move to the communities for opportunity and advancement, but not knowing the sacrifice and the exposure that their children are going to have.
Yep.
Honestly.
For sure. And that's why we did it. And now we're realizing, we gotta get involved. We gotta start having conversations. We gotta rub shoulders with other parents. And
if me being transparent makes you uncomfortable, there's an issue.
Yep. For sure. So, again, thanks for being here. I hope, you enjoyed being here. I hope our listeners enjoyed it. I'm sure they did. Please, everybody, make sure you follow Cam on social media.
Yes.
What's the Instagram handle?
At CamJustice7.
Hey.
CamJustice7.
Everywhere. Twitter, all of those things.
Yes, CamJustice7. Cam also is putting out some playlists. He's, I don't know how much he's using.
Serenade list.
Yeah, I don't know how much he's actually using his turntables, but that's the next step.
Yeah, we're working on it.
So
actively.
We got to get Cam spinning some music, but tune into those every now and then.
Well, he's in school now, so there's going to be a shift.
Yeah, it'll happen this Wednesday. I have half a playlist together, so it'll happen Wednesday.
Nice.
If he has this out by Wednesday.
Yeah, follow him on social media. You can find those. Please follow Kevin and Tenisha on Instagram. Like and subscribe on your favorite podcast app, on YouTube. The Rigby's Mix It Up is what we host these on YouTube. Subscribe there, leave comments there. We'd love to interact with all of our listeners. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Thanks for being a part of this.
Thank you for the support.
Yeah, we're continuing to grow our audience, and we are, just having fun, having conversations with each other. It's a couple hours carved out for Tenisha and myself, and some really dope guests this season. So tune in next week for the next episode, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.